Hi everybody, this is Devin Dombrowski and I'm the lead developer for Wildlife Rehabilitation MD. And in this video tutorial, we're going to talk about how to create a new record. This video tutorial is also part of a series of videos that explains how to create a record, how to then update that record, and how to search for those records and export them, basically following the entire lifespan of the record in the database. So to start, we'll go to Wildlife Rehabilitation MD. And I'm already logged in, and you can see here that I'm on the dashboard, which just has some generic information that's useful for my account. It shows me how many records I've gotten in this year or how many I currently have pending. But to get to creating a new record, I want to go under the quick links on the left and click on New Record. Now on this page, there's just a few simple areas of information that I need to fill in. First, you can see that the next case number to be created is going to be 2014-7, which really means it's going to be the 7th record in 2014. And beginning next year in 2015, the first record will be 2015-1. And of course, the numbers go 1 through however many you get in. So to create the record, the first thing I need to do is identify the species. And I can do that one of two ways. I can click on the New Record Species link here, which brings up this dialog box which shows me all of the known species to Wildlife Rehabilitation MD. So I could go ahead and look through all the amphibians or birds and mammals, and if I saw the animal that I wanted, I could click on their name. So if I was getting in a beluga, which would be very, very amazing, I click on the species name and that populates the field here. But of course, that's very time-consuming and cumbersome, so you really only want to do that if you didn't know the spelling or you couldn't properly identify the species or common name. A much faster way to identify the animal, or identify the species, is to type in their name. And you can do that by a few different ways. We could type in, for example, if we were getting in a red-tailed hawk, I could start typing in hawk, and you can see that it's generating a list of all the species, and red-tailed happens to be on top. But if it wasn't, if the species I was looking for wasn't on top, I could continue typing, and it narrows the list down. I could also type red-tailed, which finds all of the red-tailed species. So in this case, there's 3. This is a bird that I'm looking up, so I could also type in RTHA, and it'll bring me that as well. Now I want to mention that the list of known species, of course, is very long. And at first, if you start typing in an animal that you haven't gotten in before, perhaps maybe a junco, and you can see that so far it's got the list of the 3 juncos. And in my area in California, dark-eyed juncos are the most common, so I would probably select that animal. But it would be convenient if the most common species were on top of the list. Well, Wildlife Rehabilitation MD will start to do that for you. It will basically learn what records are most common to you. So as you begin to admit new species, those species will be higher up on the list. And you can see as I've selected the species, it knows the class, which of course is aves, birds, and its conservation status. The conservation status comes from the IUCN Red List. Next, I need to identify the number of patients that I'm admitting. Usually it'll be 1, but if the person was bringing in a nest full of dark-eyed juncos, and there were 3 of them in there, or 4, or 20, I could select the number, and now 3 records will be created. So one last thing that I wanted to mention about the species. If your center gets in an animal that's not known to Wildlife Rehabilitation MD, that is okay. Suppose somebody came in and they brought in a chicken. You can type chicken in, and it's not any of these 3 chickens, it's just an everyday ordinary chicken. When you put in that species, you'll get this warning that comes up. And what it's saying is that you are admitting an unknown species. You may use it, however, reporting may be less accurate. And essentially what that means is that the database does not know that this chicken happens to be a bird. It doesn't know where it's native to. It doesn't really know what a chicken is. So it's okay to use it, but again, the reporting on this particular animal won't be as accurate. this animal, because it's unknown, also won't show up on the annual reports for many of the states. But we're going to go back to our dark-eyed junco. And continue moving on. The next thing to fill out is the rescuer's contact information. And the first thing to note here is that none of this information here is required. And that is because you never know what rescuer contact information you're going to get, if you get any at all. You may have this animal on your doorstep when you come in the morning and you have no idea who actually brought it in. Of course, it would be ideal to fill in all of this information for your records, but none of it is required, so don't feel obligated to. And I could go ahead and type in the person's name, and suppose it was, Jim Smith. And his phone number could be, if he has an alternate phone number, I can type that in. If he gave me an email address, I can put that in as well, jim@email.com. And his address could be 123 Main Street. The state or province will default to your state or province. And postal code. The rescuer notes are general basic notes about this rescuer. So for example, if this person made a very large donation, or they were really, really nice and you want to make a note of that, or maybe this was a rescuer that was a little bit more difficult to manage, you can write that in here as well. And of course, if they made a donation, you could check that box. If this person is a volunteer at your center, you could check that as well. Now the other thing you can do is reuse existing rescuers in your database. So for example, if Jim Smith had already brought in animals previously, I could ask him if he's done that, or maybe he told me that. I could go to look up rescuer, and maybe he gave me his name, so I can type in Jim. Well, okay, so there are a number of Jim Smiths in my database, so this isn't the most clear example. But let's suppose that this is the Jim Smith that brought in that animal. So I could select him, and it would take his information and populate the fields with it. And of course, I looked him up by his name. If maybe he gave me his phone number or an address or a city, you can use any of these fields to help find the rescuer that you want to reuse. So now we have the rescuer's contact information. And the next thing we want to do down here is put in the intake, which is essentially why the animal is coming in and where is it coming from. So the first thing we can do is put in the admitted by, which in my case, this case is me. And the next thing we want to do is identify the address and city and state found. Now, if the animal came from Jim Smith's address, I could save some time and just check this box and it'll fill those fields in. Okay, next we'll put in the date found, and we can say that it was, maybe he found the animals yesterday and he's just bringing them in now. Observations are, what did Jim Smith observe? Why is he bringing in these 3 juncos? So let's just say that they fell from a nest. And the next is what fed. So did Jim Smith feed anything to these animals? Hopefully not, but we all know that rescuers do that with good intention, hopefully, but not always the best results. So if he did feed anything, I could type in, water and crackers. And then the last field there are intake notes. And intake notes is very similar to the rescuer notes. It's just a place to put in generic information to help you further identify why the animal is coming in. So maybe he told you some information about this animal that didn't quite fit under observations or under what fed, but you needed a unique place to put that kind of information. Well, you can just type it in there. Then the last thing to do is to say whether or not we want to create this record and then create a new record on the same screen, or do we want to create this record and then go directly to it to edit this record. So I'll just say that I want to edit this record. And now I click the Create This Records button, which created all 3 records for the dark-eyed juncos, and it's brought me to the initial care screen, which is really the next place you would want to go to for updating information on this record. But basically, now those records are created. Now there's another way I want to show you how you can create a record, which is a way to duplicate a record. So let's suppose that Jim Smith brought in these 3 Juncos today, and he came back an hour later because he found a 4th one that fell from the nest. Well, it would be perfectly fine to go to the new record screen and fill out all this information again, of course reusing the Jim Smith, but that's a little bit more hassle than we would need to go through. So instead what we're going to do is go click on Duplicate a Record, which can be found here in the top of the new record screen. So by going to the Duplicate Record screen, the first thing I would need to do, and the most important thing, is to make sure that the current record that I'm viewing is actually the record that I want to duplicate, which in this case it is. But suppose I was on record number 1, which is a golden eagle. I don't want to make a duplicate of that. I want to make sure I duplicate one of the 3 Juncos that Jim Smith has already brought in. So record number 7 was one of those. So now on the screen, what I need to do is identify the rescuer, and it's going to be the exact same person, so I will use the original rescuer. The intake information is already filled out for me, and I can't make any changes on this because it's under basically the same circumstances of admission. All I really need to do is I put in the duplicate case information. So how many duplicates do I want to make? Well, he's only bringing in 1 more. But if he brought in 2 more, I could, of course, check 2, which would then make a total of 5 Juncos. Let's just say 1. The date found, which will pre-populate with today's information, which is probably fine. Observations will pre-populate with what the other Junco had, as well as with what fed. And if I needed to make any changes here, I could. But hopefully, when I first admitted the first 3 Juncos, I told Jim not to feed anything to them. And he didn't this time, so I'll write in nothing. And intake notes again, if I needed somewhere generic to put some information, I could write that in. So now I've got all my settings done for this record, so I just click on Duplicate Record, which then creates a 4th dark-eyed Junco. So that is how you create new records in Wildlife Rehabilitation MD. If you want to know an even faster way to more quickly admit records, we do actually have a 3rd option, which we're going to skip in this video because I don't want to get too detailed. But it's the Quick Admit extension, which allows you to very, very quickly admit your patients. There are disadvantages of doing it so quickly because you don't get as good and thorough information, but sometimes when you're just trying to catch up on your records, it's a nice tool to have. So now, to follow along with the series, go check out the Updating Records for the First 24 Hours video. Thanks for watching.